Legal professionals, what's the funniest way you've ever seen a lawyer or defendant blow a court case? Story 1. Not a lawyer, but I took a class on constitutional rights where we had to read decisions from my country's Supreme Court. This was one where a woman was suing her employer, a company, because IT had found adult pictures of the woman on the company's computer. IT gave the tip to HR, who proceeded to contact the company's legal department. Anyhow, the woman was fired and she sued because she claimed that by showing the pics to the lawyer, the company was going against her right to privacy. HR also threatened to release the pictures to the other employees if the woman kept suing or something like that. In the end, the court decided that HR had to return the pictures to the woman, and that was it. The funny thing was that the woman claimed that those pictures weren't actually adult pictures, even though she was without clothes and in suggestive poses. She claimed that she had arrived tired from work, passed out on her bed, and her little daughter took those pictures. Story 2. I represent school districts. Now, one of my clients has a farm that is used to teach agricultural science to the students. The manager of the farm decides to brutally euthanize a ton of chickens in full view of a group of elementary school students. Sometimes farms have to euthanize chickens. That wasn't the problem. The problem was that he was whacking the chickens over the head with a hammer. And he had to whack each chicken like 5 or 6 times before they died because he's apparently some kind of psychopath. The poor chickens were not dying. That didn't deter him. And if one refused to die, he'd just toss the chicken on the ground and then try again with another one. But the birds were all getting horrifically damaged so that they were flapping around in circles on the ground or waking with terrible stuttering limps or screaming. One of the kids recorded it and wow, it was awful to watch. So I recommended the school district fire him immediately because, holy hell, he sued for gender discrimination. Yeah, guy, because that's why you were fired, because you're a man. Makes perfect sense. And in fact, if a woman had brutalized a bunch of chickens and slaughtered them in front of kids, she would still have her job today. That makes perfect sense. And I'm sure all the parents would wholeheartedly agree. Story 3. A funny historical one here. Marshal Ney is on trial for treason after Napoleon gets overthrown for the second time. His lawyer desperately tries to save the marshal's life with an unusual take on things. Due to a border change, Marshal Ney's hometown was at the time of the trial in Prussia. Therefore, argued the lawyer, Marshal Ney was not technically French and accordingly could not be guilty of treason. Marshal Ney disagreed and shouted out to the court, "I am French and I will remain French." He was subsequently found guilty and sentenced to the afterlife. This also has a double whammy with perfect last words. He asked for and was given permission to lead his own firing squad. His last words to them were, "Soldiers, when I give the command to fire, fire straight at my heart. Wait for the order. It will be my last to you. I protest against my condemnation. I have fought in 100 battles for France and not one against her. Soldiers, fire." Talk about a way to die. Story 4. Not a legal professional, but I do have a good story on this topic. 15 or so years ago, my dad was the manager of a small hotel. One of the semi-regular customers was this big Samoan dude who booked in for a day at a time, always had a few visitors, and then always paid in cash. In a one-to-one conversion with American dollars, highly unusual in Australia. My dad always said that he was a great customer, very friendly with the staff, never gave anyone any problems, and always had a bit of a chat when he checked in. One day, a couple of detectives rocked up and asked to speak to my dad. They showed him a photo of the aforementioned customer and asked if he was currently staying at the hotel. Dad confirmed that he was, and in a matter of minutes, a small contingent of cops arrived, stormed the room, and escorted the guy away in handcuffs. Turns out the guy was a pretty major drug dealer and was wanted in a couple of states. Cut to the court date quite some time later, and my dad is in the witness stand. And for whatever reason, the defense is trying to make out like my dad didn't know the defendant and had never seen him before. Obviously, my dad insisted that he did, in fact, know the defendant, but that line persisted from the defense. As my dad left the witness box, he walked past the defendant and said, "Hi, Barry," to which Barry enthusiastically replied, "Hi, Jason, how are you?" While I'm sure this wasn't the only thing that counted against him in the case, it certainly can't have helped. He ended up getting quite a few years in jail. Story 5. My father is an attorney, and he always had a story for us when we asked him this question. He tells it way better than I do, but I'll give it a shot. Some dude was allegedly smashing a wall with a sledgehammer with others in order to break into private property. The cops roll up, and he's the only one to get caught. Now, fast forward a few months and this guy's in court. Apparently, a cop says something about how the defendant was the only one that was caught, but there were 2 other men who fled on foot and couldn't be apprehended. My father's client's face lights up in an aha moment and immediately tells the judge, "Not true, there were 4 of us." I guess he thought that if he could disprove someone that he said that he'd be let go. Safe to say he was found guilty of vandalism, and my father says the judge just kind of sighed and told my father it would be a good idea to keep his client quiet. If I was ever an attorney, I would think that that would be the most frustrating thing about representing these people. Like, how do I get my client to stop saying and doing stupid things? Especially when it's clear and obvious that they're 100% guilty and probably should be punished. Everyone needs a lawyer, I get it, but my patience for stupid people would be at an all-time low, and thus, probably would not be a good lawyer. Story 6. I'm a bankruptcy paralegal and I used to work for a Chapter 13 trustee who told me this story. A debtor who filed a Chapter 7 bankruptcy was going through the normal questions at his 341 meeting. Now, this meeting is a hearing without a judge where the trustee asks debtors simple questions regarding their situation and the paperwork that they've filed. Creditors may also question the debtor, but other than the IRS, no one ever showed up. And when I was there, the IRS representative always fell asleep, and I'd have to wake her when one of the cases that she was there for was called. For the most part, it takes no more than 5 minutes per case. The hearing basically exists for the debtor to confirm under oath that to the best of their knowledge, their paperwork is complete and accurate, and for the trustee to adjust any issues he has with the case before the case is confirmed and allowed to take its natural course. With few exceptions, an attorney has done all their paperwork for them and is with them, representing them at this hearing. It's all very straightforward and a non-event for the most part. One document that the debtors have to provide lists all their personal property. Another document that they provide is used to protect their properties, as in bankruptcy, you're still allowed to keep your stuff, your car, your house, provided the value of these things is within certain limits or meets certain various criteria. Now, most people do not have to give any property up at all. However, in a Chapter 7, a trustee can seize any of your property that is not protected. This would be property that is worth more than the values that are allowed and that is not protected by other factors, such as being exempt for seizure from various reasons provided by the law. The trustee can also seize property if that could be protected, but the debtor has failed to fill out the correct paperwork to create that protection. I'm oversimplifying things, but that's the gist of it. But again, very few people lose anything at all. Anyway, in his paperwork, the debtor in this story failed to disclose one item in particular and had also failed to include in the paperwork that would have protected it. And that is why he was forced to remove the Rolex from his wrist and hand it over to the trustee right then and there. Story 7. I was still in law school working for a solar practitioner part-time. We had this divorce where the dude got caught cheating and his wife cleaned out the bank account, which was the only marital asset to pay for her attorney fees. There was absolutely no reason for her to pay that much for an attorney, and due to that, the attorney on the other side was inflaming her client to fight on every little issue to earn that retainer. Now, our dude was also very stupid. He didn't pay the court-ordered temporary child support order, and due to that, he had to pay some of her attorney fees. But after all of that is dealt with, we have a date to hear arguments on anything that's not agreed upon. Our biggest point is he'll pay the support order, but she owes him half the bank account amount. We get in front of the judge, and she tried to argue that she used the money to pay for a new place and moving fees. That's BS. We've had a financial statement where the wife stated that she paid pretty much the whole amount as a retainer. The judge turns around, looks the attorney in the face, and tells her that her signature is on the financial statement, meaning that either she lied on the statement or she's lying right now. The judge tells her to think very carefully about her next statement and that, in her opinion, the wife needed to pay half the money back. Other attorney goes quiet, asks for a recess, and completely changes her resolution position. We basically had her by the balls because she knew if we wanted to, this could amount to a bar complaint, as she made a false statement to the tribunal. We got him back all of his money, and he got to claim his child for the next 5 years on his taxes. Honestly, felt bad for the wife because she had no clue how badly her attorney was screwing her over. This, among other things, is why I refuse to practice family law. Story 8. Not me, not a legal professional, but my brother's EMT instructor used to live in Chicago. This one's a twofer. The instructor himself had had his license suspended for numerous traffic charges, including evading police. but forgot about his arraignment date until about an hour before. So the guy hops on his motorcycle and drives himself to the court. Now remember this for later. The guy in the court right before him is a Hispanic guy. So the judge reads off everything he's charged with, and then the conversation goes like this. Judge, Mr. Gonzalez, how do you plead? Gonzalez, no hablo inglés. Judge, Mr. Gonzalez, do you understand a word that I'm saying? Gonzalez, no hablo inglés. Judge, Mr. Gonzalez, am I to understand that this whole time no one has bothered to get a translator for you? Gonzalez, no habla inglés. Judge, well, I guess if you can't understand what you're charged with, we'll have to drop all the charges. Gonzalez, gracias, señor. Starts walking out, and the judge says, get back in here. And after him, the instructor goes up. The judge reads his charges and then asks him how he got to court that day. The instructor, oh, my brother gave me a ride. Judge, is that right? Instructor, yes, Your Honor. Judge, looking at the bailiff, do you have that footage from parking deck 3? He then proceeds to play video footage of him showing up on the exact same bike that he was using when he ran from the cops. His license remained suspended, and the judge told him he couldn't go anywhere near the bike during that time. There was even a cop standing next to it when he left. That's a nice trick that you can get charges dropped just by not understanding what the charges are, by not knowing the language, or at least pretending that you don't know what they are. Who is to say for sure? And I wonder if that was a calculated move by the judge because he suspected that the guy actually did understand English. It was a clever way to trap him and having him thank you when the charges were dropped. Like, how would he know to even thank you? Story 9. So this wasn't the defendant but a plaintiff, and I was on a jury for a civil trial. There were 2 co-plaintiffs suing one defendant. The first co-plaintiff was being represented by his father, who was an older guy and didn't seem to have much experience in court. For the first week of the trial, seemingly every other question was being objected to, usually because his questions weren't questions at all, or he was trying to elicit testimony that was hearsay. He basically pissed everybody off and presented a terrible case. The second co-plaintiff then gets on the stand, and it's clear that he was there very reluctantly. He gets to the defendant's lawyer's turn, cross-examination, and the co-plaintiff bursts out that the only reason why he's there is because of a fiduciary duty to the other plaintiff. Then he gets asked if he feels that the defendant owes him any money, and he just says no. It was 6 weeks of this stupid trial. It wasn't every day, and there was no trial during the week of Thanksgiving, but it was excruciating. And we, the jury, ended up rewarding no money to anyone. What a colossal waste of time. Story 10. I saw the cops blow it once. A high school friend got a speeding ticket, and he ended up in court questioning the cop. He asked where the cop was situated when he clocked him, and he was sitting under an underpass, and asked him, would you say it was dangerous to speed in that situation? Yes, the traffic was heavy. Do you remember me saying at the stop that there was another vehicle, same make, model, and close in color as mine? Yes. How can you be sure that you pulled over the right one? Between clocking the vehicle and pulling it over, I never took my eyes off of it. Now at this point, my friend says, after the stop, if I had pulled quickly onto the highway from the shoulder without looking at traffic in the rightmost lane I was entering, would you say that that was dangerous and something that you might pull me over for again? And the cop is like, yeah, if I saw you do that, it would be unsafe, and I'd pull you over again and give you another ticket. Are you admitting that's what you did? My friend, are you testifying that you would never pull out into traffic without checking the rightmost lane you were merging into? The cop responds, yes, I wouldn't do that. Friend, so it's safe to say that when you pulled out to chase me, you definitely did so safely. You already said the traffic was dense, so are you sure you didn't just fly into traffic and possibly also hit someone? The cop, smugly, no. I'm quite sure I didn't almost hit someone or pull out in a dangerous fashion. What does this have to do with anything? Friend, well, you said earlier that you never took your eyes off the vehicle that you clocked. And now that you're saying that you entered the roadway safely because you checked the lane that you were merging into. Can you please explain how it is that you managed to keep your eyes on a speeding vehicle in dense traffic, retreating from you at a high rate of speed, and looked in your side mirror and rear view mirror or over your shoulder and merged safely? Cop, I mean, it's possible. And he just kind of looked pleadingly over at the DA at this point. The judge had had enough, reamed my friend, but ultimately dismissed the ticket. Story 11. I spent 2 days in jail many moons ago, and I ended up in the felony section. That was fun. Anyway, I met some pretty interesting characters, and one such gentleman, I can't remember his name, let's call him Bob. There were about 4 of us in a cell, and we're just shooting the crap and discussing why everyone is here. Bob is back in jail. He is borderline mentally handicapped, and before his current situation, he was facing 2 felonies for something I don't remember. His lawyer eventually convinces the court that he can't stand trial because he is not mentally competent. They eventually let him go. So what's the first thing that he decides to do once he gets out of jail? Try to steal the first car he sees in front of the courthouse, which is adjacent to the jail. It didn't cross his mind that cops would go in and out of that area all the time, and he was back in jail probably 30 minutes after he got out, after beating 2 felonies. Oops. I really hope that this guy gets the same judge again too, because I'm sure the judge would be like, "Didn't I just see you like a day ago? What the heck did you do this time?" The real bummer of it is that guy, aside from the new charges, I doubt he will ever be able to convince a judge again to dismiss any cases based on his mental competence. Story 12. Saw a lawyer schedule a preliminary trial on a non-criminal court day. Now, these days were reserved for family, traffic, etc. The lawyer insisted by not doing so, it was a violation of his client's right to a speedy trial. He was in custody at jail and needed to be transported about 2 hours out of town for his court case, and the judge knew the lawyer would be late. He was always late. So, when the inmate arrived to court on the scheduled non-criminal court day, the lawyer was, you guessed it, late. Once the defendant was processed to the courtroom, the judge immediately told the clerks to not call the lawyer's office, and he started looking at his watch. After about 10 minutes, the judge called it, and we processed the prisoner to the transport vehicle. By the time the prisoner was moving off the property, the lawyer pulled up into the parking lot. There was a closed-door session between the judge and the lawyer, to be a fly on the wall for that conversation. Story 13. I went to court with a friend who was really nervous and just needed someone to sit with him. Drug court was very interesting. One girl was there with her mom who kept trying to speak for her. The judge would ask a question and the mom would answer. The judge would remind the mother that her daughter was 18 and could speak for herself. This mom would not listen and was pissing the judge off. The mom even started getting an attitude with the judge and started saying, "She's a child, she's scared." The judge was like, "Ma'am, she's 18. She's not a child anymore." He finally threatened her with contempt of court, and that got her to be quiet. The girl ended up getting a slightly harsher punishment than the other people, pleading youthful offender, and I definitely think that her mom helped out with that. Instead of having a drug test once a month that is $50, she was put on color code. This seemed to make the mom mad even more, who then tried to say something again, but this time the daughter elbowed her. If I was in that position, I would have wanted my mom or dad as far away from the courtroom as possible, unless one of them was a skilled attorney or something, because how embarrassing already that you ended up in court with charges after just becoming an adult. And now you have your mouthy mother to contend with? Clearly some added stress that I would not want to deal with. Story 14. I had a client show up to court wearing the same dress that she had on in the video, showing her damaging her ex property. Bonus. I had another client who was sleeping on a couch when his roommates invited the cops in. He was under a blanket, so the cops asked him to stand up for their safety. The dumbass stood up and a baggie of meth fell out of his lap onto the ground. He had no idea how it got there. I'm going to share some advice for all you fine folks. You don't have to let the cops search your car or home. Seriously, tell them to pound sand. My crime defense professor had a doormat that said, "Come back with a warrant." If they threaten to get a warrant, be nice and tell them that you'll wait. I love cops, but often they violate your constitutional rights, and that crap needs to stop. Story 15. A girl who was about to completely get off with no more than an adult caution due to her going to Australia, well, she decided that even this was not fair, as she wouldn't be getting any punishment. She was arrested for stealing her boyfriend's car, hitting 3 vehicles with no license, then leaving the scene, and then arriving back to the house and threatening him with a knife before that we could get her to gunpoint onto her stomach, where once arrested, she damaged a police vehicle and spat on the custody sergeant. The boyfriend refused to make a statement and said that he was driving, and the custody sergeant decided to leave the whole spitting thing alone. When we got into the box, she took off her shoe and threw it in the direction of the judge. Naturally, the size of the courtroom and her not being LeBron meant that it didn't even get far. Safe to say that she ended up with some time having to be served inside, and subsequently, no Australia. Story 16. I'm not a legal professional. However, I found it necessary to represent myself on a custody matter of my daughter who was being physically abused by her mother. My daughter came to live with me, and on the day that she arrived, she had a bruise on the side of her face. She told me her mother had sucker slapped her and bounced her face off the refrigerator door handle. Reported to the police and CAS with no results. Skip ahead to almost 2 years later of making myself knowledgeable on court procedures and self-representation, and I knew that regardless of the issue, my ex could never resist the need to correct me. Appearing in front of the Superior Court Justice with my ex and her lawyer, the justice asked, "What was this about my ex slapping my daughter?" I informed him of the bruise on her face and that my daughter told me her mom slapped her. My ex went into a rage, yelling that she would never hit her daughter and that I was making this up to paint her out as a bad mother. I looked at my ex and said that our daughter told me that you slapped her and bounced her face off the liquor cabinet. Without missing a beat, my ex said that it wasn't the liquor cabinet, it was the refrigerator. Her lawyer did a facepalm and the court justice winked at me as he put it over for a final hearing to award me custody. Sweet justice. When you're dealing with someone who is that narcissistic and arrogant enough to think that they can get away with this crap in court, that is the perfect strategy to implement. I'm sure that once the judge started making rulings in the guy's favor too, that just made her blow her lid even more, knowing that she was found out and she couldn't manipulate the court anymore. Good on this guy for coming up with a bold idea that worked out great for him and his daughter. And hopefully life is much better for all of them now. In the comments, does anybody have a story of how you beat a narcissistic person at their own game?